I think there's maybe one good Tarantula deck in Marvel Snap. Marvel Snap's newest card, Tarantula, is a 2/2 with an end of turn ability where if you have the highest power among cards in play, he gets +1 power and he gives +1 power to 2 cards in your hand. Now, the wording here is unfortunately quite specific. It buffs cards, which means if you play skills, it can try to hit the skill, and I think that does hurt the card because a lot of what you want to do with a card like this is play it with large units that tend to be played with techno-organic virus. I think that really restricts what you can do with Tarantula. So what we're going to do in this video is take a look at 3 decks that Tarantula can be played in, one of which I think is actually a pretty good home for him. The others are maybe just sub-meta level. Aurora is a deck that is very suited to playing a card like Tarantula, and it's because a lot of what Aurora looks for in a 2-cost card is something that is specific to what Aurora is doing. That is to say, you really want an end of turn or 2 abilities that you aren't typically going to get a lot of in a deck like this. Tarantula is pretty solid here additionally because you have cards like Sam Wilson and Hydra Bob to enable you to get just a couple of procs on the guy. But mostly what he's doing here is just not actually having to do too much. Being a card with a reasonable body that gets reasonably buffed by Aurora is kind of all you need out of a deck like this. And Aurora is always a deck that is looking for more ways to get points into its own package. So we already have a pretty decent amount of things that are going to reasonably be targeted, right? We have these activates, both Zombie Mr. Fantastic and Awesome Andy. We have an ongoing on reveal in Captain America, but what we don't have at the 2-cost slot is an end of turn. And while we do have end of turns elsewhere, having a cheap one does actually legitimately help what this deck is trying to do. And that is the best use case I've seen for Tarantula so far, which is to say that there are some other things he can do, but in those other decks, I feel like he's often fighting uphill to actually succeed, where in this deck, it's like, no, this is actually filling a role in a meaningful way. Tarantula is not an incredibly powerful card, but I do think it's worth distinguishing between decks in which he might actually legitimately just be a really good option for you to play and might legitimately win you some games over decks in which you can play him, but he's very much more along for the ride. The Aurora deck actually does want a 2-cost end of turn that isn't Havoc and isn't Thena, right? It really legitimately wants that. And Tarantula is that. And if you're able to get him rolling, he can be that for a pretty reasonable price, like even a couple of procs, and suddenly he's a 2/8 that is doing that. That's actually just great for a deck like this that doesn't need a bunch to happen, but just needs enough to happen. So if you start a game with a Hydra Bob and then you can play the Tarantula out, that's a really good thing to do. Sam Wilson, usually going to be a 2/5, pretty reasonable to get some procs off of that. And the more combo-oriented your opponent is, the more you're going to need those procs, and the more you're likely going to get them because of the way the combo decks tend to play out. I think I was pleasantly surprised by how functional and good he actually felt in here, and I do like him in the Aurora shell. Here's an example in which I feel that he's a totally playable card, or more to put it a different way, this is a totally playable deck. But I don't necessarily think that he's particularly amazing in here, largely because of synergy. This is a card that I am very rarely choosing to play over my scalers. It has a bit of the Aunt May syndrome, where Aunt May is a card that you're happy to play, unless, of course, you're already playing a Sam on 2 and then a Craven on 3, and then you're looking at this Aunt May like, okay, what, I'm playing this scaler on 4? That's not when you have the ability to play these scalers. To me, it felt like the rest of the deck was significantly better than Tarantula in every version of the Move Rantula shell that I tried. And there were a couple, and this is probably the best one because it's very hard to be a bad deck when you have this good of a point package and a Supergiant and a Negasonic and a Wilson Fisk in your deck. Not a very difficult bar to clear. But Tarantula himself just wasn't doing a lot. I get that the theory is you play 1-drop, you play Tarantula, you play Wilson Fisk, it's awesome, it's great. But in practice, I would rather play every other 2-drop in the deck first. And if I'm not having like, it's nice that I have a fourth 2-drop, I guess, but it was rarely going to be the thing that either made a difference in the game or won the game. I care so much more about playing Craven and Silk and Sam on 2, and I care so much more about playing those cards on 3 as well, so that if I have 2 of them, I'm just never playing Tarantula out there. It was a really meaningful constraint on what this deck is trying to do, where you're really only getting him down on turn 4 if you have a good draw, and if you're getting him down earlier, it's because you have a bad draw, and the bad draws aren't going to trigger him. And so he just ends up being there. He's very clearly card 12 in this deck. And while I do think that like the rate on him is reasonable, like I really do think like the card is closer to being a good card than people are giving it credit for, it just doesn't seem to fit a lot of places. The really frustrating thing about Tarantula is his anti-synergy with Techno-Organic Virus. There's a pretty obvious thing that Tarantula is telling you to do, which is play big 1s and play big 3s. There's a Martyr angle here. There is a Starbrand angle here. And I think that play big 1s, play big 3s is one of those things that should be really apparent in the design of this card. The problem is, every time you want to play a big 1, it's a 1 with a drawback you're erasing. You want to play a big 3, it's a 3 with a drawback you're erasing. The best way to erase those things is to play Techno-Organic Virus, and the fact that Techno-Organic Virus being in your hand can brick your Tarantula is just like, I don't know why that's happening. And it does seem like a completely unnecessary thing. It's not like this card would have been broken if they had it with the ability to actually hit the stuff. I don't really get it, but here we are, and it's happening, and it is a meaningful nerf to this deck. And I cover this deck largely to cover the sort of cohort of virusy, Sauron-y Tarantula decks, because again, I really don't think he's bad. I just don't think he's good either. In the context of the move deck, it's because you have better things to do. In the context of these decks, it's because what he's giving you isn't particularly meaningful. You're already playing these guys that have like these massive stats on them. So you're adding like 1 point to your Cull Obsidian or whatever. And it's like, all right, you know, I like it, but it's nothing to write home about, right? Like it's just kind of cool and enjoyable. And there's nothing really to complain about, but it's just not really doing too much. I think largely this is the big thing about Tarantula, is that A, it's a little bit difficult to realize all of the gains that you'd want from him. B, he'd pretty obviously be better if he gave all the power to himself. And C, I don't even think the version that gives all the power to itself is particularly overpowered, although it probably is not super fun to play against. They're likely trying to balance how fun it is to have your opponent get repeated value over turns, snowballing against this, but honestly, I think they might have gone a little bit low on Tarantula's actual power level. That said, I do actually think the Aurora deck is legitimately pretty solid, so we're going to jump into some gameplay for Tarantula in the Aurora list right here. As always, I have been KMBest. You have been phenomenal. Let me know what you think about this more condensed sort of card spotlight thing. I've never done one like this before, and I think it's going to be shorter than most gameplay videos. Ideally, I just want to get like a couple games on there, get like a 20-minute card spotlight with some gameplay. Let me know what you think. And as always, I've been KMBest. You've been phenomenal, and enjoy the gameplay. Bro, I'm gonna cry. Actually useless. Okay, well, the Mercury is a pretty big deal, I suppose. Branch doesn't do a fucking thing. And corrected. I'm not moving them. I think torch is bait. I was wrong. Wait, I can't, like, if I move Mercury to Human Torch, what happens? Anybody know? Honestly? What if I don't move anything? I don't know. Neither did they. I think they're playing. I'm assuming I'm getting 1 cube out of this, but if I snap now, they're already only staying if they beat this shit, so it is what it is. Thanks for the Phantom X, I suppose.
Oh, snap.
They could be a Mercury gamer. Who knows? It's far more likely they're just a Mobius game. Works, but I've got that ride to the Butte. Yo, Unk. Imagine he gets my Mercury. Would never happen, right? Unfortunate. Tribunal before MMM? No. I only win this game because they think they're getting through the Tribunal thing, I think. Honestly, I think it might be this. Cold game. I mean, presumably this works. I don't know.
The mystery intrigues me.
Woo! Whoa, scary. Just so much more than the man. He's the everything. You know what I mean? He's just genuinely the GOAT. Really no other way to say it, right? Like, he's just... Anyway, if we don't get Mercury here, we are fucking dead. I just be move bounce. I mean, that is a much more winnable bit of gaming, I suppose. Does a save. Iron. I don't like that. I think this is... God, if we all... way I see it is I gotta just try to shut this down as best. Okay, it's a vulture. Uh-huh. All right.
All systems go.
It's clobbering time.
Like this has got to be it, right? Nice. Shit. We played this person. I don't remember what they were playing. Were they a move gamer that I just did move things? What are they? If I snap this, what happens?
Opponent
They snapped, so I'm gonna stay. Yeah, Bob goes before Thing. I am fascinated. Am I just dead to like a null? What are you? I don't know. Okay, seems good. Not good, but they all have to go mid for us to lose. Okay. All right.